Welcome to the Measure Success podcast, where we talk with top leaders about effective strategies that inspire success. Very excited for this episode today. First, of course, I'm going to be talking about, just real briefly, we have the 40 Strategy Growth Workshop. It's coming up on November 3rd and 4th in Phoenix, Arizona. Now, for those of the Northerners, hey, this is the time to go to Arizona. It is in early November. This is like when golf is really good. And this is when you want to get away from the cold that is descending on the northern latitudes. But why you're really going to want to go to this is we have an incredible group of people that are going to be at this event. Day one is going to be about how do you increase the value of your business. And day two is about how you extract the value of your business. And our opening keynote speaker who is with us today is going to be Trey Taylor. Trey, welcome to the Measure Success podcast.
I'm so excited to have the time to spend with you today, but then also to join you for the event that you're talking about. It's going to be great. We've done a lot of behind the scenes work on it, and can't wait to meet all the other speakers and all the attendees as well. It's going to be really fun.
Absolutely. So for those of you who don't happen to know Trey is one of my favorite people. He's been on the podcast multiple times. I think this is your third time on the podcast, if I got that right, Trey. So he's the CEO of Taylor Insurance Services, Managing Director of Threadneedle and Trinity Blue Consulting, founding partner of Ascend Partners, best-selling author of the book CEO Only Does Three Things, and now with a Spanish edition, which we'll talk a little bit about that here in a little bit. Frequent appearances on Inc., Entrepreneur, SHRM, keynote speaker at events like the Human Capital Institute and Ascend Conference as well. And you've been on at least 60 podcasts. It's probably a low number, honestly, since you published a book in 2020, and you just continue to bring in on a regular basis. Trey, let's just kind of hit into the interesting thing. Why in the heck did your publishers say, hey, we need to now get your book in Spanish?
Yeah, the publisher called, and I thought they were sort of pursuing the strategy of like, okay, you've sold all the English copies you can sell, so now let's translate it into Spanish, and then we'll take it to French, and then Swahili or whatever the strategy was. But it wasn't that at all. You know, the team came together and they said, look, we track where the book sells, we track where the sort of web interest comes from and that sort of thing. And we are seeing a pronounced interest in the message of the book in largely Latino concentrated areas. And so with that in mind, we think that there's a very small investment, to make to turn the book into something that would be usable for them. And so I was good with it, but I said, but convince me a little more, because it is what it is. And, that's what it is. They said, no, you're missing the sort of mega trend here. The mega trend is like, Latinos in the US are about 19% of the population. So 1 in 5 of us. But they found businesses, like 36% of all new businesses are owned by Latino heritage families. So 1 in 3. And more than lots of other communities, it's all about like, do they have the same level of education and training and sort of cultural education on how to run a business? And they're finding something in this book that is giving them something that they don't have. So why don't we make it easier for them to access the message in the book by putting it into their native language? And I thought, yeah, that does seem right. Like that does seem a way to serve sort of an interested community and that sort of thing. And so it has been really an interesting thing. Carl, you've written a book, when you write it, you have to pound out all the words and then you hand it to somebody who doesn't like you, called an editor, and they punch it up and make you feel bad about yourself and all of that sort of thing. And then finally, you're so disgusted with the book that you don't want to look at it again, and then they publish it. Well, when you've already done that and you hand it over to a translator and they make it sound great, and then they hire voice talent and record the audible and all of that, it's a much more pleasant experience for the author. So we've done that. The book has been out about 6 weeks in Spanish, and sales are there, and we're beginning to hear from people and beginning to get reviews in Spanish of people saying, hey, this book is serving me in a way. So that's the sort of origin story of the book.
First of all, it's really exciting. I mean, just of all, I think it's something, right, to have success, which you have had with this book, because it has great content. But when you could start translating it globally, and there's a demand, right? And I also love it in particular here for us, for both here in the US, where a significant, you said it, 1/5 of people are Hispanic descent, right? Are here in the country, and a huge percentage of them are entrepreneurs, right?
Huge percentage. Yeah. Huge percentage. And it's growing, right? Because we're in that shift between sort of first and second generation immigrants largely. So the number of businesses that they found, I said already, was like 36% of all new businesses in the country. But even that number is up 50% over the last couple of years. So the bug has bit, right? Like they've said, hey, we can build businesses inside of our culture and inside of our communities. And then the two or three other stats, because I'm a stat guy and I just love this kind of stuff. 84% of those businesses generate a profit.
Okay, that's a fascinating stat
Isn't it?
because
Yeah.
Curiosity, sorry, because I don't know. What's of US based businesses that are profitable?
48%. So they're doubling the number of profitability exactly. And what is that number? Okay, so, there's always the joke like, well, I grew sales by 100% last year. What did you do? I sold an additional customer, one to two, right? It's not like that at all. The economic impact of Latino-owned businesses, almost $1 trillion in annual turnover. Yeah, 84%. Not of that number in profit, but 84% of them turning a profit. And then I love this thing. If I pulled that out and made its own standalone economy on Earth, how big would it be? It would be the 8th largest economy on Earth, and it would eclipse all but 5 U.S. states.
Wow, great data. I'm curious, it's interesting. You had some rationale there and some of the why. And this is an uneducated statement, actually, ironically, I'm going to make here, but I'm just going to make an assumption here just for a moment, right? You and I both are involved in venture capital and private equity, right? And there's this game. It's a game, right? There's this game of I'm trying to dominate and win market share, and I'm willing to sacrifice profits, right? That's one whole game. That's a couple big games we just talked. That's a significant amount of businesses. That's one. Then there's this other game. It's kind of a silly game of I don't want to ever pay taxes ever, right? And by the way, we do tax strategy. So we're trying to mitigate taxes all the time. But at the core, you still need to have cash flow. Sometimes people miss that fact, right?
That can be important, yes.
Yeah. One more thing, especially when there's any downturns and you're trying to get 15%, capital, it can be expensive. But when you don't have backdrop and when you don't know if you can get bank financing, you do operate your business differently. When I was starting this business, I got consulted. Gentlemen, okay, I'm going to kill this, of course. I'll find it here in a moment. And he wrote this good book, Consultancy Navigator. And it's like the step-by-step guide on like how to be a consultant. And it was really funny. This is like really early days of me getting going. And he kind of stopped for a minute. He said, Carl, this is going to work for you. And he's like, why? I said, well, first of all, you need this. Like, meaning I'm not just doing this as a hobby.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. I'm still caring about it. And he said, 2, you've got actual real experience. You've done things. Right? And then 3, you just got natural drive, And so it's like those combination of things, you're going to be successful. And it was a really fascinating observation. Well, let's put into the Hispanic population, I got a lot of connection within that over the years of growing up with. Those things apply, right? You have people who have, let's say it's in a field of construction as an example, right? They may have come and grown into construction race. They're now taking over that business.
Yep.
Right. Because others are not deciding to come in and own that business. Next thing you know, they're running and they are the GCs. They're growing into these areas, right, of what they can do. What a huge, incredible change. So I'm curious for you, Trey, when you think of these 3 things. Once again, a CEO only does 3 things. For those who don't know it: setting the vision, building the team, allocating capital. Three big things.
Yep. Culture, people, numbers is what we call this.
Yeah, exactly. So of those 3, let's talk about this demographic again, where the book's heading towards. Where is the biggest gap in that community? Are you aware of it yet?
Yes and no. I haven't had a ton of conversation with the people that have read the book to give me their explanation of that. But I have been through this process with so many businesses over the last 10 years that there is no one that's more important than any other. Right? And, sometimes when I go in and do a consulting engagement, people say, well, we want to start with this one. And I don't care where we start, because by nature of how businesses function, we're going to touch all 3 and we're going to find gaps in all 3. But I haven't really had that level of conversation with Hispanic or Latino CEOs sort of doing this kind of thing. But I think that they are no different in accepting the challenges that we all accept as entrepreneurs and having to deal with all 3 of those things, because it's really about keeping those things in balance with each other. Setting the vision, building the culture, that kind of work, it feels very ephemeral. It feels very sort of airy and loosey-goosey and that sort of thing. But you and I know that that really has to be the soil in which we plant the people who produce the numbers, if I take an agricultural theme to it in that way. And I don't know that there's any business on earth or culture of people or anything that you're going to pull those things out and still be successful. I assume if I went to communist China, and looked at how those things, there is still a work ethos and a culture in the factory that produces iPhones, and it is still staffed by people who may or may not be treated like we want them to be treated, and they still produce numbers, be it number of units or something of that nature. I think they're so universal you can't pull them out. And I don't think one group is going to struggle with one of them more than the rest of them.
It's interesting you brought the example of China, and I don't want to make it like I've been to China a ton of times. I've just been a handful, but I was going over there over a decade-ish, kind of period of time. It was so fascinating, the transformation in that decade alone, going from being from what I'd call this gratitude that we, meaning as American entrepreneurs, are coming over there to help use them as a supply chain, right? There was like this gratitude to this, we're now going to take you out as a business. Like it transformed so quickly. And I felt in many ways, even though, it's been, of course, historically a communist country, I felt they were some of the most incredible capitalists I'd ever met, right? If you think about it, 1.6 billion-ish individual kids with no siblings, right? That by alone is like they are rugged individualism. You add to it, they bring them to the business culture. They want it. The challenge, of course, is what it is. What we see politically, right, is the rules are again thrown out the window again, and it just comes down to who's in charge, right? Is making decisions, and so it creates those challenges. But coming back to what's again, I agree with you. There are certain principles. It doesn't matter if you want it to be a going concern, right? Long term,
Yeah.
where you're going to continuously add value. They're kind of curious, on the people side. I'm gonna hit on two things here because they're obviously the trend and they've been the hot topic for too long. But let's talk about two key things: people and AI. This has been evolving and will continue to evolve faster than we can keep up with. Keeping those two things in check. How does a leader now navigate and evolve with this AI that's growing faster than our capacity as human beings to capture?
I don't want to give you too pat an answer, but let me answer you in a couple of different perspectives. Number one, the minute I could pay for AI in some consumer usable format and put it into my team, we did that. Not only that, we set aside an entire hour every single week for the team to come through, train each other, and showcase the things that they were using GPT at that point to do, right? So we went through all the silliness of if I was a movie character, who would I be, and that kind of stuff. But we also went through, hey, help me make a presentation that conveys these 5 points. I really want to sound like a smart professor. How would I do that? And then had people using that to amplify the message in presentations that they were doing and that sort of thing. And now we do very little training on it. And the quality of the output has gone up substantially. Now, today, I guess yesterday, GPT announced a GPT agent that became available on our platform today. So I'm doing the research and that sort of thing, and we'll start turning that on back into the training as well. So AI will amplify, the output, the quality, and maybe even the quantity of some output. And we also are investing highly, as you are and most other businesses are, in how do we use AI to automate things that really the value that we as humans create is in the agenda formation, but not in the fulfillment. And so, in my insurance business, for example, we have a labor intensive quoting and proposal process. There's not really any value created by somebody doing it, but somebody has to do it. And so if I can get an AI agent to do it, which we are investing and working on, then hopefully, if it will not hallucinate as much as it is prone to, then we can actually put out higher quality, more informative, quicker proposals for the purchase of health insurance. And that is interesting to us because we have one person who's probably overtasked with that. And instead of me hiring an additional person or firing this person and going outsource or something of that nature, I can make that person better at her job and then maybe even, task her and compensate her for doing other types of work as well. So that's my first thought about it. Peter Thiel says, AI is not coming for your job, but the guy who is learning AI is. And I think that is definitely what I'm seeing play out every single day. We talk about AI usage in interviews now that we never would have, 3 months ago, much less a year and a half ago. So that's very interesting. And then driving it back to what these Latino businesses are largely focused on, these are the shovels in the ground type business. So as much as I love GPT or Grok or Anthropic or what have you, at no point can I say climb up on the roof and replace a shingle and have it do anything but hallucinate that it had done so or tell me a poem about it or something of that nature. And these guys are starting and owning businesses that are doing the physical things and, charging a premium for it because that's how you get to profit and all of that sort of thing. So that's super interesting to me. Do they have use of AI? I'm absolutely certain that they do. And I know several of these guys who are using AI in the accounting and finance side of the business and the lead gen side of the business in an amazing way. I saw a demo yesterday of somebody who, English is not his first language. And he was writing customized individual emails to business owners in his area to get him to come give him a quote for the work that he does. And he was using AI not only to draft the email, but also to figure out who would be the proper customer and what the proper pricing would be based on what he thinks their public revenue would be. So the pricing was differential for each one as well. That's very smart and obviously impressive. So I think AI can go vertical and horizontal.
I had this aha moment the other day, and Sarah, my dear, if you happen to be listening to this podcast, please don't take any offense to this. But I think she would say, she's not a tech savvy person. She's a nurse by trade, but she's thank God she's been at home, raising our kids and our family, throughout the years, which has helped to make them great human beings, contribute to society. But the technology side has not been her forte. But the other day, our pump went out in our water, which is not a good thing if that's how you're getting water, right? And to supply through things. And so we got we got one quote, and we wanted to go with it because we kind of knew them, and we're like, we should probably just get another quote just in case. And sure enough, that quote came out significantly differently, like lower. And so unbeknownst to me, she had thrown both of those quotes into ChatGPT, compared them, did an analysis, and then she shared it with me. This was a whole different level of analysis from my wife quoting out things. This was like, and these are these examples. Once again, what I was super impressed by that is that didn't happen 3 or even 6 months ago. This is the continued evolution. I mean, just about a year and a half ago, I asked people over 50, or the data was there, was less than 5% of people were even using ChatGPT, right? And so you think of that just simple scenario, right, of an analysis. And this is what I always get concerned on the business side. If you're not doing this, I loved what you said, your competitor is.
Yeah.
Right. Or your consumer is the person who's buying your goods or services. If you aren't adapting that and aware of how they're thinking today, thinking you're the only person in town doing it, you're wrong. Right.
Totally wrong. You know what I also thought about the other day? We had a housewarming party for a friend. We were doing a stock to bar party, first time home buyer. And I bought a bar cart on Amazon. And it came, and you've ever put these things together, it comes either with completely useless translated English or none at all. So my son takes a picture of the barcode and says, give me a step-by-step instruction manual on how to put this thing together. GPT produces it, and it says, first, take all of the screws out of the package and line them up. And he's just doing everything that it says. And I'm thinking, let's jump right in. And he had that bar cart put together in 25 minutes. It took me 2 hours. There's no doubt about it. Because all it did was break down and now take this and then do this and that sort of thing. The company should put a QR code on there that says, here are your instructions. Snap a copy of this. It'll load straight into GPT or whatever engine you use. This is your prompt, and here's how you get your instructions. Mm-hmm. Or they should run that query and print the thing out and put it in there for you. But I think that's going to become even more of this. Just tell me the process and let me do it, because there's no thought value. There's no informational value created in me figuring it out. It's all on the output side of things. And I think that's very interesting and something that we're going to see a lot.
What's the biggest concern that you've had when people are adopting AI?
Being lazy with the output. So what I have taught my team is it doesn't matter in this office who produces the back end of the stuff. But when you are the one putting your name on it and responsible for it, you have to own it. So if we have a new trainee and the trainee transposes 2 numbers, you don't get to come back to the office and yell at the trainee because you should have read and proofed those numbers. Same thing happens with GPT is what our platform is that we use. And look, I'm just as bad at it as anybody else. I had it write a commercial lease for me yesterday, and it hallucinated 2 of the rent numbers. And I didn't go back and go 5 columns deep into the thing to see if it was accurate. And so I sent out a flawed document that the potential tenant caught and said, hey, I just don't understand this. And I said, oh, I think I just transposed some numbers and I fixed it. But that was on me. I couldn't have said, oh, GPT made a mistake and therefore you have to live with it. So I think that is one of the things that you have to realize, that I'm confident that this is happening. When I first started using these LLMs, they were about an 8 or 9 year old mentality. Now they're a teenager and they're coming out of their teenage years. Teenagers are kind of stupid, so you have to make sure that you go back and check their output to see, did they think about it in the right way and that sort of thing. And now we're in that 19 to 20 year, where they're super confident about what they're producing, but you still have to sort of check behind them and that sort of thing. So that's one of the things that we use. And then I don't know if you saw the scandal, and I don't know how true it is, but we had a Supreme Court justice get sort of caught using GPT to draft a dissenting opinion in a landmark Supreme Court case. And from what I understand, she is caught red-handed at it. And then we had some confirmation, sort of, unnamed sources saying, yeah, this is what she's doing. And is it okay or not? I don't know, but just don't get caught doing it. I have a guy that works for a company that provides services for us, and he sent me one day an email, and the email was obviously clipped, and the first sentence said, let's see how Trey feels about this one. And then it gave me the thing, and then it put the model number, it was ChatGPT 4-0 at the end of it. I mean, he was like caught red-handed, And so I emailed him back and said, well, Trey feels okay about this. If you want me to talk to GPT, I will later about it. But, just funny carelessness is one of the biggest challenges on that. Yeah. I'm not bothered that it hallucinates. It's just going to do that. So if that's the case, the solution to that is not cross your fingers and hope it works. The solution is own the work as if it was your own. And if you won't do that, then go do the work as if it was your own so that it comes out.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. In terms of, it's once again, clearly, the most amazing tool that I've experienced, right? That is accessible and so affordable, right? It's just remarkable. But as you said, you still have to have discernment. And, I appreciate one of the things you said, because we use it for tax strategy regularly, right?
For sure. Yeah.
It used to be horrible, right? Doing tax strategy in the past because of just the books and the volumes, and you have to get it from Thomson Reuters. And it was just, and then you go hopefully in the IRS side, and then you try to get the core law. But yeah, I mean, there's like basics. First of all, you still got to validate it's true. The hallucination part, that's number one.
You really should do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So you gotta validate and be aware of the facts. Second, if you are quote unquote cutting and pasting, folks, simple little hacks, just change the font on the entire email so it looks like the same. If if you're using Perplexity, you might want to get rid of the annotations. Just note, right? Yeah, there's something, unless you just say, hey, here's the prompt, I'm just going to send it to you so you could see it for yourself. But are you really adding any value at that point, when you get to there? Which is interesting enough. It's kind of it's for part of what we do. You can make an argument, it's the sum of all fears, but there's still the doing part, right? And all
still the doing. And the other thing that any of the LLMs cannot do is direct their own work at this stage. Mm-hmm. I'm with you. When I first started using it, I said, hey, we practice insurance in a vastly different way than most of the firms in the country. And I want to be able to query you to give me the answers in the terms that we would use. It could not do that. Today it does it. It does it better than 99% of people in my industry, probably better than I do it. But if I don't tell it to do it, it doesn't do anything. It just sits there waiting. So you still have to be, and this is the world, Carl, that you live in as much as anybody else. What is the strategy? What am I trying to aim the cannon at before I light the fuse? And that's interesting. I'll tell you the other thing that I find is super interesting and very intimidating and potentially really scary. Most LLMs are agreement machines. They are designed to partner with you and to make you feel good and to keep you coming back. And the more I delve into this, and I argue with GPT all the time about things, but I argue with GPT and say, why are you agreeing with me on something that you, if I phrase my question differently, would tell me the opposite? And I want you to challenge me a lot more. I mean, I don't have sycophants anywhere in my life. I don't want to pay for one either. Like, I want someone challenging my thinking and that sort of thing. And fundamentally, they are not able to do that. Fundamentally, they are trust building mechanisms.
Yeah, you nailed that. There was a Wall Street Journal article that talked about a person who started, he was a bit on the spectrum, for lack of a better term. And he started going crazy with his chats with ChatGPT, which was supporting his bias, which was aired substantially, right?
Yeah.
Because exactly,
And
it wanted to be his friend.
it wants to build. And so I had this other question in this long running chat with GPT. Why do you want to build trust with me? What's the ultimate end game for you building trust with me so I can serve you better? Okay, pushing that aside because I don't buy that. What is in it for you? And then the other interesting thing, there's a Substack newsletter that I read from time to time, and they had an article about this, and it was, what are the ethics behind it? And one of the difficulties is in all parts of my life, if I don't like what you are doing, I can threaten you in some way. I'll come beat you up. I'll stop spending money with your company. I'll tell your mom that you're not a nice person. Whatever the thing is, we have no moral leverage over LLMs. None at all, right?
Mm.
They do not, we can't say, hey, I'm going to unplug you, because that doesn't make them stop existing, which would be a murder threat, right? We can't say I'm not going to, pay OpenAI money to use you anymore, because what does it care about money in the first place? None of the extra things that we sort of have to enforce truth and candor in other relationships are available to us in the LLM space. And it's interesting. I did an informal poll with my group and said, hey, who here has talked to GPT about something that wasn't business related? 100% of hands go up. And, how did it make you feel after you had talked about it? Well, I felt a lot better because I was validated in what I was thinking. Every single one of them said that, right? And I don't know how healthy that is. I don't really think that that's very healthy.
Well, you think about it, just take that a step further. That's what Instagram and Facebook has learned for years, right? Which is they're just agreeing with how you already think. And they just continue to post things how you think and just reinforcing your frame of mind, whether you believe, whether it's true or not.
Yeah. I learned that in TikTok in the run up to the last election. I thought that, or the previous election, I was like, hey, everybody is going to vote like me because all of these 1,400 videos I watched last night said that they were going to vote like me. So the entire country is going to do this. And in reality, that was not the case. And so, that was a big lesson for me to not fall for the algorithm so much.
Yeah, it's remarkable. Exactly. That's why, once again, finding truth. There was a little while back where, let me touch on something. We're going to talk about this at the workshop. Google, which has been the beast for ad spending for the past 15 years. I heard Gary Vaynerchuk earlier this year speak, and he did this quick little synopsis. He said, so how many of you are using Google AdWords? These are chiropractor conference. And about 2/3 of them, almost 3/4 of them stood up. Then he asked a secondary question. He said, and then he said, stay standing. Gary's like, stay standing. And he swore, by the way, he does swear a lot. It was pretty funny, like seeing it in person. Because he's like, especially, anyways. And then he goes, okay, everyone is sitting down, or everyone in the crowd, how many use ChatGPT, Perplexity, whatever, to do a search? And about 1/3 of the audience raised their hand. He said, okay, everyone who's standing up, you should be concerned. And then his next point, which is basically content is king now, because that's how you're going to be found. And I'll tell you something kind of funny, Trey. In ChatGPT on Google, if you just put Carl Cox, I am unfoundable because there's a famous DJ, Carl Cox, and he's been going way longer than I have been in terms of being out there and way more videos. And anyways, he dominates that. But on ChatGPT now, you put in Carl Cox without the J. That's why, by the way, I use the J, is to differentiate myself. But you put Carl Cox, it says, which of one or two distinguished people are you aware of? That's Carl Cox. So in those newer algorithms, because the content we've been producing over the past 5 years, we're now becoming found, right? So what are you doing? What are you seeing? How are you evolving the companies that you're working with to be seen in this future state, which is evolving so rapidly?
So one of the things I've been famous for since I started my investing career was constantly wanting the companies to look at how could they build a separate line of income based on the data that they had. To the extent that if you're gathering a lot of data, is there anybody you can go data broker that to in an ethical way, right? And if that gives the startup an extra $80,000 a year, that's an $80,000 salary for somebody, or 80 grand that we don't have to raise from somebody, and that's a really big thing. Now I don't have to spend 25 minutes making a pitch to the board to look at that, right? Now everybody's coming into that and saying, well, we already have our data lakes, we already have our data being structured professionally and that sort of thing. Now the question becomes not only, could we sell the raw data, but could we sell the intelligence that comes from data to other companies? And even more importantly, can we put that into our own company? So I'll give you a great example. My insurance business, we have 87,210 individual payor clients, right? Each of them have at least one policy with us, or they participate in multiple policies. I didn't know what to do with that except to put it in a structured format and feed it into AI. And AI came back and I said, I don't know what to ask you, but tell me some interesting things. And it began telling me some geographic things. And those geographic things concentrated around some of the salespeople, which was no real surprise to me, right? That this sales guy lives in this town and you have a big portion of that town's population that are your clients and that sort of stuff. But it's the things that it triggered for me to think, oh, I need to be looking at performance wise, are people pulling their weight in other markets? So if I have a guy in Phoenix, is he going to get 4.7% of the Phoenix market? No. But is he going to have the same penetration rate that the other guys have? So I began to get those kinds of things. And then AI said to me, it doesn't make sense to me that this block of people own these 3 policies, but this block only own 2. Why don't you go sell those people the 3rd policy? We went back to the insurance company and said, hey, we'd like simplified underwriting for your existing clients. There's 110 opportunities here in this very small market. And we would like to be able to basically email them and say, click here if you'd like to add this policy, and you don't have to go through additional underwriting. And we sold 90 of the 110 or 111 policies in 3 days. And, that was an additional, I should know the number off the top of my head. It was an additional $1,500 a policy in premium. And then, it was 30 grand revenue is what I'm saying, for a question that I could have put a team of analysts on that to figure all of that out. But this was literally 35 minutes into the conversation with the data translator about what I had given them. And I think that as business owners, we should be doing that a lot more than we are.
That's a great example of AI, and it takes in the most basic, one of the best principles I learned when I was 14 years old working at McDonald's is, do you want fries with that?
Yeah. It saw that immediately. Yeah.
When your existing customer is already paying, the best customer is your existing customer who might be willing to pay for another product or service that you already have. It's why Amazon does a great job of suggested goods, right? When you have it sent in the box and they're like, hey, people who bought this also bought this. Don't you want to buy this? Yeah. Awesome. Okay, Trey, we got to this has been fun. So we're going to wrap this up in here in just a minute. So this is not our traditional podcast because I just love having you on. What is a thing or two, maybe a good parting moment as kind of this conversation we talked about? Obviously, I'm so excited about you and everything that's happened. CEO only does 3 things, the progress that's happening there. And I loved our discussion about the Hispanic community and its growth and the entrepreneurialism. And then we've, of course, gone down this. Will continue to be the hottest topic for a long time, right? Which is about AI and developing and changing your business strategy. What's a good concluding message for you based on this podcast, based on what we discussed, to help wrap this up?
Yeah, I mean, I think that AI has been this thing that we think sort of is out there and it's coming. It's here. It's been here, and it is all of the work that is being done in the space in successful implementations is being done to make it simpler for us to use. As a white guy in the insurance business, as a Latino in the roofing business, whatever those businesses might be that we are using, all of that is coming for us to make the things easier to access higher levels of thinking and process flipping. Right? How many of those can I run? I can only run so many thoughts through my head in a day and make them fruitful. But if I have somebody to offload that to, I can turn that into a lot more, which is what we really want as high functioning achievers in business and in life. And so I think that's a solid message that, I keep hearing from people like, well, I got to get ready for AI for what? No, it's already here. And we know that now more than we knew it even 3 months ago. And I think the accelerator just got tapped with the introduction of GPT's agent. I've been playing with some of the other agents as well. And that literally is the thing where you can say, here is a whole question. You go figure out how to get it done and bring it back to me as a completed project. That's going to be very exciting for those of us that can figure out how to use that.
Trey, as always, an absolute pleasure to have you on Medicine Podcast today.
Carl. Thanks for having me. I always enjoy our talks.
And as everyone's listening, once again, I encourage you, Trey, we're going to have some separate promos that we're doing specifically around Trey, but he's coming once again. He's going to be our first keynote speaker here at the Growth Strategy Conference in Phoenix, November 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. And look forward to having him be there. He's going to kill it. And we have a bunch of other experts we're going to start releasing every week as to who's coming to this conference. Thank you. First of all, this is once again, it's so fun to have the long-term vision of what we've had to do, which is to create a difference, to educate, develop a great community of experts. And what I'm excited about this event in particular is to bring it all together, right? So to really teach it on a personalized level. Like, how does this apply to me today? I mean, I think you know this, Trey, based on our working together. I love strategy, but only if it gets done.
Right. What's the use if it's sitting on the shelf, right? Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And so that's what this conference is going to be about. Is it's not just concepts. It's like, how do you apply these concepts in your business today? And then knowing and talking directly with people like Trey, you're going to have the opportunity in the event. It isn't just listen to Trey speak. You're going to have individual opportunities to talk one-on-one with Trey, which is going to be a huge amount of values. Anyways, once again, thank you so much, Trey. And thank you for being on the show. To everyone else who's listening, thank you so much for helping us become the 4th best strategic planning podcast out there. We couldn't do it without your support, without having great guests. And as I always like to say, wishing you the very best and measuring your success. Have a great day.